Let's see how that goes. All right. Can y'all see the screen now? Make sure y'all follow along with the video. Um, Click the Friedman News stream link. You'll be able to watch along to follow the presentation. Okay, so let's get started. So the real purpose of this presentation is to go over our goals and resolutions for 2023, as well as talk about, kind of some of where we've progressed so far in terms of reflection, and then make sure we answer all of y'all questions and any comments y'all have that we can address. So let's get started. And actually, first I'm gonna show y'all a video. We shared it a while back. Hey, how you doing, son? Let's see. So I'm going to share this presentation. Son, feel free to click the Friedman News stream, and you'll be able to see my screen as well.
Eric, I have a quick question. I want to understand this, because please excuse my ignorance. But
no, go for it.
While I have you on Twitter,
yeah,
do I click the hi sis? Do I click the stream on Twitter, or do I have to go to a different app?
You can click the stream on Twitter, and it should take you to YouTube, and you'll be able to, yeah. If you're on,
do I put you on mute on Twitter, or
if you're doing it from the same device, it probably won't work. So you'll have to have like a secondary device.
Okay. When I clicked on it, it showed you speaking in the presentation. It didn't divert from like the sound or anything, so you should be able to watch both and just hear him talk in the background. So
definitely, thank you for clarifying, A Boogie. Okay, so let's get started. First, I'm going to share this video we made last year that kind of shares like the dream of like what a Black political party could look like. It's taken from an episode of the Boondocks with Martin Luther King Jr. in it. And I basically spliced together all the parts where they talk about political party. So let me share that.
A political party.
Not just any political party. A black revolutionary political party.
But why me? You should ask Oprah to do it. She's more popular, if you ask me, a darn pretty lady. And so the philosophy of this new political party, party's basic philosophy.
I thought that went well. Where do people go for information before cable news?
We can do it like we did back in the day. We'll go into the streets and tell the people.
Yeah, I wish the president would stop lying. Black babies would stop crying. And young brothers would stop dying. I wish the police would stop killing. Politicians stop stealing and acting like they're not dealing. When you know they got bricks in the street and the country club fixing. Yo, you gotta lock those WF.
Sorry for the lag. I'm trying to live stream and do the presentation at the same time, so my computer's like, calm down. Come on.
Arcade the Freaks. That was my main man, Gangstalicious. Thug and Love. We're going to the phones. WFRK?
Hello?
You sure are. Do you know what that means? It means you're going to the Martin Luther King Emergency Action Party. then baby girl, you're gonna be in the building.
Thank you, Huey.
Thank you, Dr. King.
Do what you can.
That was the last time I saw Dr. King. But the story doesn't end there. King's speech was replayed the entire next day on the cable news channels. Then, something
Dang. This is the worst I've seen it. Let's see. It's almost done though, so once the video is over, it should be pretty
unexpected
cool.
happened. People got angry.
Nobody knows exactly what to attribute to the sharp decline in African American dropout rates. That is every African American player in the NBA refusing to play until there is a full troop of drones.
Billionaire Bob Johnson apologizing to Black America for the network he founded.
The White House and Congress are receiving an unprecedented amount of calls from irate African
And
Americans.
revolution finally came.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the video. I'm sorry that there was so much lag. But let's get it back into the normal presentation.
Political party.
Not just
The rest of the presentation is broken up into 3 parts: party, politician, or party, policy, and politician. So the party is about freedmen voters. So let's get into that. Okay, so this is the data that we've put together over the last year about, back one slide. Jesus. Okay, so
I like the lions on the presentation.
thank you. You can thank Eugene for Bean Daddy on Twitter for helping us design that. Okay, so here's the data. So there's 47 million people considered African American or Black in the United States. Of that 47 million, 80% are freedmen, which is 42 million. And of the 42 million freedmen voters, or sorry, 42 million freedmen citizens, 32 million of us are eligible to vote. So if you look at the 2020 voting data, 22 million of us were registered voters. 20 million of us actually voted, and 10 million were unregistered. 12 million didn't vote. And out of the ones that did vote, 13.4 million were Democrats, 6 million were independents, 600,000 were Republicans. And so when you look at this pie chart, it kind of gives a breakdown in terms of numbers. And if you can see, the number of non-voters that are freedmen and the number of freedmen that are Democrats are roughly equivalent. And so when people complain about the Democrats or complain about the Republicans, we can change that, because there's not only enough freedmen voters, there's enough of freedmen that don't even vote, that can vote, that could change the outcome of any election. And then the 6 million independents are greater than the number of Republicans that are freedmen. The only problem is those 6 million freedmen don't know there's other 5.99 million of them that exist, basically, you know what I mean? So they're not organized in how they vote. So the way to think about this is like offense and defense. Offense is getting the non-voters registered and voting, and secondly, getting the independents voting as a voting bloc. And then defense is removing the 600,000 freedmen that are Republicans or the 13.4 million freedmen that are Democrats. And based on the CBC poll, 58% of basically Democrats that are freedmen voted for reparations as the number one issue. That would represent around like 6 point something million of the current number of Democrats that we could potentially pull away. And then if you look at the country as a whole, 43% of the country are actually registered as independents. 27% are registered Democrats, 27% registered Republican. This chart shows that 43% versus that 27% over time. So this is like from like early 2000s until today. And independents have increased over time while Republicans and Democratic registration has decreased over time. Now, this second chart is more about the two-party system. So if you combine the Democratic and Republican registrations versus the independent registrations, this shows a more clear view of like, okay, if there's so many independents, why hasn't the two-party system collapsed yet? And it's because together, combined, they're more powerful than they are individually, right? So that power though is decreasing, and there's been 3 moments in the past like 10 years in which it's been 50% of the country independents, 50% of the country are part of the two-party system. And eventually that path will cross when there's more than 50% of the country are independents and less than 50% of the country are a part of the two-party system. And we're on the verge of that happening now. The midterms was a sign of that. This current deadlock to choose the Speaker of the House is another sign of that. And so moderates are winning, independents are winning, and that is the future trend of the country. Now, the other thing to take note of is the value of a vote over time. So in 2020, it was $91 per voter. That's basically taking all of the election spending and dividing it by all of the votes received. That gives you the amount of money, the value of your vote per citizen or per voter. And it's actually increased over time. You'll see, I'll show another chart that shows it going up from, about 38 in 2000 to 91 today. So it's 3x in about 20 years. But anybody who tells you your vote is not valuable, your vote is worthless, they're lying to you, because the data clearly shows your vote is increasing in value over time, not decreasing. And then in terms of dispelling a myth about both independent voters and third parties, 41 out of 50 states allow independents to vote in primaries. So 41 out of 50 is 82%. So you don't really have to worry about this idea that if you register as independent, for example, that you can't vote in a primary. That's a huge myth that the two-party system perpetuates to keep you from voting against them. So, and then obviously every independent can vote in the general election. Okay. Next slide. And Ms. Giselle, let me bring up Ms. Giselle too. Okay, next slide. Let's see. Okay, so this is how the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, defines political parties. So they define it on 3 tiers. Major parties have 25%, 25% or more in the last general election. Let me get back to the last slide. Yeah, 25% or more in the general election, in the previous general election. Minor parties have between 5 to 25% of the popular votes in the last general election. New parties receive less than 5% of the popular votes in the last general election. So why is that important? It's important because not only is your status associated with which tier you fall on, but public funding, taxpayer money, is given out based on which tier you're on. So if you're a major party like the Republicans and the Democrats, they are offered $100 million each per election to basically use as they please. Um, Minor parties are able to get a percent of that $100 million based on the number of popular votes they've received divided by the number of major popular votes received. So here's the interesting thing when you look at, say this pie chart from 2020, which summarizes the popular votes from each party versus the party registration. If people vote according to their party registration and independent voters have options to vote for, um, these major parties are a mere 3% away each from becoming minor parties. And not only is that significant from a political earthquake that will happen, but it will also affect their funding. And a minor party like ours that could achieve that status by taking away, 3% each, for example, um, it would also change the denominator that this equation is based off of. Meaning, you only need to count one of these parties as a major votes, which would accelerate their collapse. So it will happen fast and then suddenly, essentially, and it'll seem like it came out of nowhere. Um, the only political party that's gotten close um, in the last election was the Libertarians. They got about 1.2%, but historically, the best has been Ross Perot. He got 20% in the general election. Um, and that was kind of like the height of a third party kind of um, contesting the two party system. So it is possible. It just needs a concentrated effort and people to understand that there is a path to success. And really, these two parties are not as strong as they seem. Okay, next slide. Let's see. Dr. Deborah Jenkins says she's trying to join but can't hear anything. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, great. She may have to close the app and open it back up. I know Twitter is janky sometimes since Elon took over. No, I'm just kidding. It was janky before, right? Okay, so here is kind of the breakdown of how political parties are structured. Um, there is a governing body, which in the case of the Democrats is called the DNC. In case of the Republicans, it's called the RNC. And in our case, we have the Freedmen National Committee, the FNC. And everyone who's a member is eligible to become part of leadership in our case. The DNC only has 447 members that control the entire Democratic Party. The RNC has 168 members that control the entire Republican Party. Our party is far more democratic. Anybody who's willing to, follow our policy and Freedmen agenda and basically pay dues are eligible to be an FNC member. And so over the last year, we had 27 FNC members, and essentially our goal is to grow to at least 200 this year, which would put us past the RNC, and then by the following year get to 500, which would put us beyond the DNC. So we'll kind of get more into um, our plans for the future. But the point is, uh, um, anyone can join the party for free, the Freedmen Party for free. And then if you want to be a part of leadership, you get voting rights by paying your dues. So it's way more democratic. One person, one vote. And not a lot of the politics in the RNC and the DNC. There won't be some upper limit cap on how many people can be in the FNC, for example. Okay, the next slide is more about projections and what our goals are over this year and over the next few years that'll get us past the next general election. So in 2022, we grew the party basically from like 0 members to like 3,000 either followers, people that we had emails or their phone number. And then on the Freedmen National Committee, we had 22 due-paying members and 5 that were our endorsements that we subsidized their dues so they didn't have to pay dues in 2022. And here's that chart I was referencing earlier about the value of a vote over time. 38 in 2000, 44 in 2004, $48 in 2008, $54 in 2012. In 2016, it was $51, and in 2020, it was $91. The other thing to look at is how we're able to grow and how we can actually get to where we need to get to in 2024. So, for example, if we want to reach that minor party status, it would be around 8 million Freedmen Party members all voting as a block together. That would be like the bare minimum to achieve minor party status. Based on our growth last year, we basically doubled every month. If we continue to do that, we could reach 7 million by the end of this year, 20 million by the end of 2024, and so on. And then in terms of FNC growth, like I said, try to reach 200 by the end of 2023, 500 by 2024, and somewhere beyond like 5,000 plus in 2025. And then the last thing to look at is ballot access. So in order to make these votes valuable, you need ballot access. And so here's the historical ballot access of these third parties over time. Yellow is Libertarian Party, green is Green Party, the red is the Forward Party. These are their projections. So their goal, the Forward Party's goal in 2023 is to reach 29, to have ballot access in 29 states and 50 by 2024. Our goal is to at least get 10 states this first year in terms of ballot access. And that's, 10x. And then in 2024, it would be to get to 50, which would be 5x. So a much more reasonable growth pattern than what the Forward Party is trying to accomplish. And, if we try to get ballot access in once a month, in one state a month at least, that'll at least put us on a trend where we could at least get through 10 in 1 year. Okay. Now, the last part of this section is about technology. Let that slide load. So 2022 was mainly using the website as our main way of like sharing information and organizing the party. In 2023, we'll be building out the mobile app, and that will be like our second platform. So we'll have the website and we'll have the app, and you'll be able to interact either way you prefer. So that's the first part about the party. This next part is about policy. And if you've been to our Freedmen policy page, you've seen this information before. So this will be largely review, but I'll just go over it for the sake of the recording and letting everyone know who may not have seen it yet. Okay, so it's really broken down into reparations now, Freedmen Reconstruction, and genocide prevention. And each section actually has like 5 components that are important. Reparations now, the main 5 components to take away are what the definitions of reparations actually are defined by the United Nations. And those 5 parts are restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and discontinuation or non-repetition of harm. And the other two things to think about in terms of why this is important, we had Special Field Order 15, the Freedmen Bureau Act, both spelled out our 40 acres. One was an executive order, the other was a legislative act by Congress, but also signed by Abraham Lincoln, right? And then in terms of like calculating how much we're owed in reparations, uh, our ancestors were valued at $4 billion in 1860. That's the equivalent of 230 trillion in 2022. The latest number for 2023 is actually 246 trillion. Um, the 40 acres valued at 400 million in 1865 are currently valued at 17 trillion in 2023 dollars. These are actually 2022 numbers. Um, and then the Freedmen Bank, the 57 million in 1874 would be equivalent to 1.32 trillion today. So that equates to about $6 million per freedman, in terms of what we'd be owed on the short end. If you take the Compensated Emancipation Act in 1862, one freedman was valued at $300, and instead of that money given to a freedman, it was given to slave owners for letting us be emancipated, right? So if you take that $300 in 1862, it's worth 16 million today. So if you look at the number of petitions and the number of freedmen that were emancipated, there was about a 1-to-3 ratio, which means that there was 3 slaves to every 1 owner, which means actually on average, each slave owner got the equivalent of about $45 million today. So to give you an idea of how ridiculous that act was. Okay, now let's go on to Freedmen Reconstruction. And again, there's 5 important parts to Freedmen Reconstruction as well. The Freedmen Bureau, Freedmen Schools, Freedmen Bank, Freedmen Hospitals, and Freedmen Courts. And basically the schools and hospitals and courts were all part of the Freedmen Bureau Act. And then the Freedmen Bank was a separate act of Congress. But the Freedmen Bureau and the Freedmen Bank Act were signed on the same day, March 3rd, 1865, after the 13th Amendment, but before the 14th Amendment and before the 15th Amendment were ever put into the Constitution. And Lincoln was not killed for the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment. He was killed 5 weeks after the Freedmen Bureau Act and the Freedmen Bank Act were signed on the same day by him. So that's some more detailed history in terms of timeline and what was the cause of each event. And then the other thing to look at is kind of, again, just scale. There was 4 million freedmen emancipated in 1865. There are 42 million freedmen today. And then if you compare our freedmen population to the population of African immigrants, they are currently at 5 million, right? So they're smaller than American freedmen, but there's more African immigrants than there are freedmen that were emancipated from the 5 tribes today. So that should give you an idea of like what changed in over 150 years. Okay, let's get into, last but not least, genocide prevention. And genocide prevention, again, has 5 parts. And these 5 parts are defined based on how the United Nations defines genocide. And we can basically define it by lynchings and massacres, physical and mental harm, apartheid, extermination, and family separation. And this is how the UN like literally defines it by word. If you want to read each one, and the U.S. being a UN country had to implement these laws in its own country. So actually, one law that we have yet to take advantage of as freedmen is the genocide code, Title 18 U.S. Code 1091. And that is something we should enforce not only at home. It's great to charge genocide against the United Nations to get their attention, but we have laws in the United States that we can use to charge genocide within our own country's jurisdiction. And the actual penalties of genocide in the United States are pretty grand. If you committed genocide that results in the death of someone, then you get basically life imprisonment or capital punishment and or $1 million fine in addition to that. And then basically, if you think about all the different harms that we've experienced, we qualify as freedmen for every act of genocide, from family separation, extermination, apartheid, physical and mental harm, and lynchings and massacres. And in almost every field of data we could collect, we are the highest percent of that harm by percent of the population of the United States. And so it's a clear act and a clear intent that we can show that this genocide is happening on purpose. And actually, one other thing to think about is who these acts largely happen to. So lynchings and massacres and physical and mental harm mainly happen to freedmen men. Apartheid happens to both freedmen women and freedmen men. Extermination is mainly targeted at freedmen women, and then family separation is mainly targeted at freedmen children. So they have like kind of plans for each of us in terms of how they deal out their genocide. So, we often see, freedmen men lying on the ground on television after being shot by a police officer or some other white supremacist, but we don't usually see the hysterectomies that are performed on people like Fannie Lou Hamer behind the scenes, right? We don't see the millions of abortions. We don't see the maternal mortality deaths, right? Those are not shown on the news like they are shown for Black men being killed, for example. And similarly, the family separation is often not talked about. Even though we're the most missing by percent of the population, we are not the ones who receive the most Amber Alerts. We're not the ones who receive the most media attention when it comes to missing persons. So that's just to give you an idea of like how our genocide is playing out in real time without necessarily everyone being aware of what's going on in each little part, because it's happening in such a way that it's trying to conceal itself, right? So let's make sure we tackle all of these, and we're not playing whack-a-mole trying to tackle police brutality and mass incarceration over here and this and that. We focus on genocide as the overarching act that's happening to freedmen, and we use the US and UN laws for genocide to bring ourselves justice. Okay, last but not least is going to be about politicians. Basically, how do we create freedmen candidates that we actually want to vote for? Candidates that we want to elect and are not selected for us, right? So let's get into that. These will be like the last two slides. So these were taken out of our candidate boot camp to kind of give an overview. So most elections, especially ones for Congress or for president, they're mainly overseen by the Federal Election Commission, the FEC. So those will mainly be the national elections. And on the state level, you have the Board of Elections or the Secretary of State, depending on how your state decided to divvy things up. But on the national level, you have the president, vice president, and you have Congress, House, and the Senate. So 100 people in the Senate, 435 in the House. And then on the state level, you have like governor, lieutenant governor, legislator, secretary, justices, um, the treasurer, and the comptroller. And if anybody remembers Save Mason, a lot of us heard of the comptroller for the first time, right? So um, these people would just be chilling in the cut, making terrible decisions, and no one knows about them, right? Um, and then on the local level, mayor, city council, attorney, judge, and sheriff are all usually elected positions. Um, and a lot of people are surprised to learn that judges and sheriffs are elected, but most places they actually are. The other thing to be aware of is the FEC has this thing called the testing the waters phase. And it means you don't need to register with the FEC until you raise more than $5,000, at which point you have to register with the FEC and make them aware of any of the funding you've raised so far. The goal of this testing the water periods that the FEC created is to basically allow people to try things out and see if they have enough traction to actually run for office without them going through the more burdensome process of registering with the FEC. And last but not least is how our endorsement as a party can potentially help your campaign, and kind of what skill set and what tools we've kind of built up over the last year that can help propel your campaign. So one, obviously we can help with fundraising. We created the Freedman News Network, FNN, so we can do interviews, we can do news stories and cover your campaign as it progresses. We can also run polls and collect information about, how well your campaign is doing. We can help you run your social media. We can help you run ads. We can create campaign videos. We also created a candidate boot camp, basically a course that you could go through to kind of up your knowledge. Excuse me. And then we also have an annual convention. And the goal of that is kind of to introduce our endorsements to the public, as well as allow them to kind of share their campaign and their goals going forward. On the tech side, we can help you with building a website. We can also do robocalls, texts, and emails. And then in the more R&D side of things, we can help with election prediction and key performance indicator analysis. So we can track how well your campaign is doing, almost like your vitals, and using that information give you an idea of like what you need to improve, what your likely voter turnout will be, and basically kind of help fine tune your campaign so you have the best outcome. So that is the whole presentation. So I'm gonna open it up to more conversation now. Let people hop on stage if they haven't got a chance yet. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions, any comments, or suggestions y'all may have.
I'm not sure. I think everybody in here may be Freedman Party members. So.
We got some heavy hitters, but we need Miss Giselle to join the party. Miss Giselle should definitely join the party. I've seen Miss Cleopatra Bell a lot, so Miss Cleopatra, you should consider joining as well. And Sean Renee Friedman, I've seen Sean Renee in a few spaces as well. We have this. Let me share the link. We streamlined our process for signing up. Basically, just go to freedman.party. I'll share a link to make it easier. And then you can just sign up, create an account. And then if you want to be a part of leadership, once you sign up to join the party, it'll show you kind of how to join the FNC if you're really serious about being part of leadership. But yeah, anybody can come up, ask questions, and get your questions answered. we'll probably be in here for another 15 minutes at most if you guys want to keep going. Um, but yeah, this is basically what we're looking at going forward and what we want to accomplish. Phoenix, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, when you break it down the way you do with the data and the numbers, it just makes it definitely inspires me, and it makes it sound so doable.
It's so doable.
The picture is becoming clearer.
Yes.
And it's doable for everyone in their own areas and AKA districts.
Yes.
Right? We can legit be in Congress representing our district,
yes,
willing and dealing,
yes,
for these votes.
100%. Actually, to add to that, one of the things we looked at as part of the candidate boot camp to give data to our candidates is we were looking at all of the 435 districts. And one of the things we looked at is the demographics for each of those different districts. And actually, it turns out of the 60 members in the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, out of those 60 members, less than half are in primarily freedmen districts. And so this says a few things. It says you can win without having a majority freedmen district. It also says that we also looked at all of the 435 districts, and out of them, there was about 8 districts where we have freedmen majorities, where there's no basically freedmen in office there. So we're missing out on opportunities as well. And if you look at districts where there's more freedmen than like white people, even though it may not be more than 50%, but there's more freedmen by number than white people, those are a number of districts that we can also win in. And the key thing is whenever we have a population that's like our national population is about all of the people who are considered black are about 13.4% of the U.S. population. 80% of that would be about 11.8, which would represent the freedmen percent of that population. So we're about 11.8% of the U.S. population, just freedmen alone. And whenever we have a population that is like 11.8 or greater in any district, that means we have an outsized advantage in terms of there being more freedmen in that place than there are typically in nationally. There's a higher concentration. And we should take advantage of any of those pockets. And if there's places, like I said, where CBC members are getting elected without even having freedmen majorities in the districts, it speaks more to our ability to bring on voters who may not be freedmen, right? To get them to still vote for us. So there's a huge opportunity. We need to primary every CBC member, and then, like I said, there's at least 8 other districts that no CBC member even holds that have freedmen majorities, and even more that have more than 11.8% in that district. So there's a ton of opportunity out of those 435 districts, and then there's 100 people in the Senate, and basically every 4 House representatives is equivalent to like 1 senator in terms of like voting power. But having 1 person, say, in the Senate that can just be the person who decides if a bill gets passed is pretty great. But having 4 in the House kind of gives you like an equivalent amount of power that you would have in the Senate. So if we look back historically, there were about 2,000 freedmen in elected office during Reconstruction. 2,000 freedmen, right? That we knew were actually freedmen on everywhere from the national level down to the local and state level, right? And there was an 80% voter turnout. So we have not reached those numbers since. We don't have 2,000 freedmen that are on code, and we don't have 80% voter turnout. The highest voter turnout we've had was when we voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012, and it was like a little bit more than 65%, something like that. And What you notice though is if we do turn out, we decide elections. When we don't turn out, we basically don't get what we want. So it's kind of straightforward. If you participate, you get what you want. If you don't participate, you don't get what you want, right? Um, all of our entire democracy is decided by voters. It is not decided by non-voters. There's no amount of non-voting that will get any policy passed, any candidates elected at all. So the myth that this non-voting idea will somehow bring about reparations by punishing the Democrats, it is a lie. The only way we will change things is by leaving the Democratic plantation, leaving the Republican plantation, and going out on the Underground Railroad to freedom to create our own party where we decide our agenda, we decide our policy, we decide who we want to raise as candidates from the grassroots. Um, that's how you change the dynamics, and where you make both parties not only afraid of you but need to negotiate with you in order to even win anything or to even get anything past themselves. And that's where the real power lies. It's like the three PPPs, or the three PPPs: party, policy, and politicians. That's the real PPP. And if we align all three of those, we can't lose. You need freedmen voters that elect freedmen candidates, and you need those freedmen candidates to then pass our freedmen agenda. That is how real politics works. We elect politicians that are on code, they get into office and then now have to vote on policy that gets passed. So it's only voting that decides things, nothing else. No amount of shouting, no amount of crying, complaining will solve anything. It's all about voting, it's all about organizing, um, voter turnout, getting people registered, getting as many candidates as we can have. If you look at how the Justice Democrats were able to get candidates in office. They started with a pool of about 10,000 nominations. And out of those 10,000 nominations, they narrowed it down to like 2,000 endorsements. And out of those 2,000 endorsements, one person won. And I think we can have a far better batting average than that. Like that's like 1 out of 10,000. Um, so our goal at minimum is to have 10,000 people go through our candidate boot camp. Out of those, choose the top 2,000 who do well on our boot camp test, and then go from there to endorse them and help fund their campaigns and provide other resources that we talked about earlier. And I think we can get way more than one of them in office. I think one is kind of like a shame. Um, Son, you got your hand up. Go for it.
Hey, family.
How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's been a while.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to everyone. Hey, sis. What's up, Phoenix?
What up?
I just have some, I guess I'm going to say questions.
Yeah.
So as far as the candidates go, I don't remember. I think we did discuss this at a FNC meeting.
Yeah.
Because it is a challenge for new parties to actually get candidates on a ballot under the party, which is always a legal challenge.
Mm-hmm.
It's also financially.
Yeah.
As it stands right now, when we have candidates that are running on the Freedmen campaign, are we going to be running them through as independents? Or because we cannot run them through right now through the Freedmen's Party?
Yes, that's a great point. I think the way to do things as we scale up and get more and more ballot access is to have voters register as independents, right? And then for candidates to, depending on, there's some strategic, advantages depending on where people are. Like, for example, when Marcel was going up against Clyburn, like there were some advantages there. When Stacey was a Republican going up against as mayor, like there's some advantages to being on certain parties depending on the candidate and where they're located. Ideally, the candidates should register as independents as well, but it's really up to them. In that sense, we're agnostic to whether the candidate is of any party because the voters will be independent and can vote in 42 out of 50 state primaries.
Yeah, and so like here in the state of Maryland, we are a closed ballot state, so we could not. It would be to a disadvantage to us. We would not be able to participate in any of the primaries unless you are party specific here.
Right.
So the question, my concern would be, or at least what I've been doing here is I've evaluated out of the primarily the three parties here that run, which is the green, the blue, and the red. And we have run candidates through the Green Party. They were successful. And we have run candidates through the Democrats, but and of course, as everyone knows, through the Republican Party. But our primary target was the Green Party because we have more control. Here, I was able to be the chair of the Green Party Black Caucus, and so it gave us the ability to, because we do have access to the ballot here under the Green Party, it gave us the advantage of getting the Freedman candidate to go through there. And so I would think that while we don't have a party that's recognized, such like the Freedman Party, that we should, as the Freedman National Committee, evaluate what party would we send our people to run through. Because if we're talking about breaking our tradition of voting blue no matter who, and yet we keep running candidates on a blue ticket, it is to our detriment because the mindset of our people are still that they are pushing blue, even if it's for a Freedman candidate.
Right.
And so we have to kind of gauge better how do we move our people from the mindset of voting blue, and how best do we position our Freedman candidates until we are recognized on ballots. How best should we run them? Like, should we run them with green?
It will be decided. It will be decided based on each election. So, like I said, for Marcel's case, like in his district, it made more sense in that case to go up against Clyburn, for example. In other cases, that may not be to your advantage. So, running as a Republican or running under an independent as an independent may be the best option. So, I think we, as the FNC, have to be flexible as we grow and get more ballot access. Like I said, voters, independents can vote. Like I said, 42 out of 50 states. In the states like Maryland, for example, where it's more tricky, then that's where you have to consider, okay, what should be the candidates, party, and then where should we then send the voters to? So we do have to play that very strategically. So there's no one size fit all answer to that. We have to be strategic based on each election where we have candidates competing. Phoenix, you had your hand up. You want to ask a question?
No, I was just going to add to the conversation, and I wanted to say that I feel what Hassan is saying in terms of, just not running on blue, period. But, that's just my feeling about it, because it's a dangerous precedent. But I was going to say as well, like, when we're running them, like, for starters, we probably have to go with and something in the data that you shared,
right?
with like how much money the other teams like to throw to run our people. Like if you're in a district and you get $100 million, then you might want to run under that red ticket. It just depends, and like you said, it's definitely not a one size fits all.
Right.
But the blue eyes, that's just my own personal feeling.
Yeah, no, totally. And again, like, think of this as like a battleground. Each of these votes, each of these elections that are going to be ran in, each of them has a unique map, a unique battleground map that determines the landscape in which you're going to fight this political war. And rather than going in with a set kind of like one size fit all strategy, we conform to each battlefield and we change our strategy based on the battlefield. And so that's really how we'll be able to actually succeed, because we won't have like this rigid plan that's like, oh, we have to do this every time, and that'll end up costing us elections that we could have won if we were more flexible, right? So it really is
Yeah, we
about
never want to be predictable.
exactly,
Like predictability is what got us in trouble.
definitely. And one of the things that took a little bit longer, I didn't get to finish all of it last month, but I'm going through each because I got the 435 districts, I got the 100 states, or the 50 states, and the 100 senators. Um, Next is the state legislative districts. There's like 7,000 of them, so I'm like having to go through all of them. Um, but the purpose of them, because state legislative districts are not the same as congressional districts. But when we are able to break down the legislative districts and the state legislative districts and the congressional districts, we'll have the insight on where those freedmen exactly are and what their political leanings are in those different districts. And that again helps us personalize our approach to each district and each city and each state, rather than again, doing a one size fits all policy. So hopefully I'll have the rest of that data done this month. That's my goal. Any other questions before we wind down? Oh, by the way, actually, another thing. So this year we're going to try to do something a little bit different than last year. So last year we had weekly FNC meetings. We're going to continue that. Instead of them starting at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 or 9 Eastern, we're going to move it to 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. So it'll make it easier for the East Coast people to attend. And it'll be on Saturdays, every Saturday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 Eastern. And then, unless we vote to change it. And then we're also going to do monthly party meetings. And those meetings will be with everybody who's in the party. And we'll hold them at 3 p.m. Pacific, every first Saturday, basically, of the month. So our first one actually will be tomorrow. So make sure today, if you haven't officially joined the party, go to freedmen.party, create an account, sign up. And then if you're feeling up to it and feeling ambitious and want to join the leadership, you could also join the FNC by following that page that will pop up once you join the party. And yeah, and then I'm trying to get back to our daily spaces. So starting on Monday, I want to try to get back to daily spaces. So we have daily spaces, weekly FNC meetings, and monthly party meetings. So that's kind of our goal in terms of like rhythm and tempo this year. Any last questions before we close out?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna back channel you about the Saturday meetings and the time change.
Yes.
That's gonna totally lock me out.
Oh no. Yeah, we'll figure out a good time for you, because we do need to kind of find the best overlapping time. So we do have some technology that helps solve that problem. We just need to get people to actually take the time to do it. Like it's slightly annoying to do, but it's super valuable in terms of helping us finding the best overlapping time. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out, Hassan. You're definitely valued, so you definitely want to see you at these meetings. But yeah, with that, if there's no more comments or questions, we'll close out, and we'll have all of our meetings on Discord. So once you join the party, you'll get access to our private website, and you'll get access to the Discord. That's where we kind of chat as well. And then we have like the equivalent of spaces on Discord where we can do our meetings, have video, screen share, do all that good stuff. So if you can, go to freedmen.party, sign up and join the party. And then, like I said, if you're interested in joining leadership, you'll have to become an FNC member. So with that, I'm going to start to sign out. But I really appreciate y'all all coming. I'm excited for this year and really hope to continue working with y'all. All right, y'all. With that, peace and see y'all tomorrow in the party meeting.
Peace and blessings.
Yes.
Peace and blessings.